Welcome back to another episode of The Sweet Spot. This is John Sherman from the Four Foundations of Golf. And as always, I'm joined by.
Adam from Adam Young Golf.
So, what are we talking about today?
Shaping. Again,
Shaping.
one word, probably 10
Man,
hours of content.
yeah. How do you shape it? Should you shape it? Who's shaping
Yeah.
it? Who isn't shaping it?
All these different questions. Yeah. So I've been doing
Why
a
doesn't
bunch
the
of
ball why doesn't the ball curve anymore? It used to curve a lot more.
I wish I didn't care.
It still curves a lot. I have to like when people say like the ball doesn't want to curve anymore. I'm like, it curves. But I remember playing with Balatas and yeah, they definitely curved a lot more. I was also a lot
Yeah.
I was a lot worse at controlling my club face back then, so I think I was hitting more slices and hooks as well.
Well, when we get the ping guys on, maybe they can tell us about the equipment and how that affects curvature. But I mean, ultimately, if you get the face 2 degrees close to the path, it doesn't matter what club you've got. It's gonna curve to the left. Maybe okay if there's a driver and it has a CG in a weird place, but with an iron 2 degrees close to the face, ball's curving left. Although someone did
So
ask me how you hit the draw fade the other day, and I responded, get the face 3 degrees close to the path and do it in a 40-mile-an-hour left to right headwind, left to right wind. I'll get the good old draw fade for you.
you definitely need some wind helping on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Or one of those bald balls from the local municipal range.
Yeah, that's another topic. Your ball's curving probably differently more or less on the range because the golf balls on the range aren't nearly as good. You don't know. They're usually two-piece balls. They're not Some of them are limited distance, some of them are beat up more. My god, there's so many topics on shaping.
Well, I'm sure you've had it where that ball that you pull out, it's got no dimples on it at all. You hit it and it's all over the place in the air.
Yeah, sometimes that's why I don't pay attention too much when I'm warming up sometimes, before a tournament on the range. Like I'm not freaking out if my ball's doing something a little less than normal because sometimes the range balls are just I don't know if they're limited flight or what's going on with them. So I try not to kind of freak out if I'm seeing something out of the ordinary.
I usually pull out all the good balls. And so I get a warm up bucket and I pull out all the good ones with dimples and I put them off to the side and I hit my longer clubs with those. And then all the bald balls, all the cracked ones, that's where I do my
Yeah.
warm up with, little pitch
Yep.
shots, things like that.
Fair
Just
enough.
getting the
Well,
strike.
I've already taken us off topic, so why don't you hit us with some of your broad thoughts here and what you want to cover?
So yeah, shaping. It's the more I write about this, the more I see all these different questions, all these there's not really standard definitions even for what shaping is. I mean, how would you define a draw? It sounds simple, right?
I mean, for a right-handed golfer, a shot that moves right to left. Now, you could also include does it start right of your target line? A hook would be a right to left that's way too much. Pull hook would be left of your initial start line and moving left. So, yeah, I guess there's some caveats in there, but yeah, I think, you know, broadly speaking, it's draw, fade, straight shot, and then
Yeah.
extremities of those.
So I would define a drawer as someone who predominantly moves the ball right to left, but that predominantly word is the key factor there because is someone who moves the ball right to left 70% of the time. Because we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
control every shot, right? We often talk about things in absolutes. I hit a 10-yard draw. It's like, well, no one does that exactly every
No, you
time.
could
There's
hit
a
a push.
dispersion
You
around
could
it.
hit a push fade, which is a double cross for the draw player, right?
Yeah.
Where
So
the
so yeah,
club
I
face
think
is way
about
too open.
That's it. I think about things in terms of 100 shot patterns. If you hit 100 balls out there, how many, what ratio of them curved to the left versus maybe didn't have much curve or even curved to the right, what you class as a double cross there. And so, you could have someone who is 100% drawer, what I call a pure drawer. Every single shot turns right to left, or maybe 99% of them do. And then you could have someone who, a neutral player, would be someone who has maybe they never hit their exact neutral shot. They go straight at the target with no spin. But, the balls are falling either side of that. They're getting a mix of spin axes. So
Yeah,
that's what I would
that's
class as neutral.
that's the world I'm starting to live in that feels a little more uncomfortable sometimes, where as you get more neutral with your path, you're going to see more fades and more draws. Whereas if you're 10 degrees out to in, 8 degrees out to in, 8 degrees into out, you're going to be more of that player you said before, where like 90, 100% of your shots are curving in one direction. So, yeah, I guess it depends what your baseline tendency is for club path, right?
Yeah, exactly. Your club path is going to determine the patterns, and then how tight your face to path is around that is going to determine the dispersion. But yeah, I mean, the reason why I'm writing, I've been doing a lot of writing on this, and I'm seeing more golfers who are kind of frightened of being neutral. What you said, and there is, I can understand, initially, if you've seen the ball draw one way all your life,
Yeah.
getting more neutral can, it may reduce confidence, at least initially, because that idea of, oh well, now I've got a two-way miss, which we'll get into what is
Yeah.
even
Everyone's
the
got two-way
definition of
miss.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I can understand how it can make you a little bit more frightened when you do that. But anecdotally speaking, I used to be what I call a pure drawer, someone who every single shot curves right to left, or almost every single shot. And now I'm much more neutral. Now I hit closer to a mix of spin axes. I'm probably about 65-35, something like that. So some of my shots fall a little bit more to the right, some of them fall a little bit more to the left. People would look at that and say, well, why did you go from a one-way miss where everything's curving left and now you got a two-way miss? Isn't that bad? I'm like, no, my dispersion is actually tighter now. And that's
Yeah.
what matters.
Yeah, that's the answer to any question. Like, should I play both shot shapes? Should I play a big draw or a big fade or try and neutralize it? And I think there's some players who might be better off with a 5 yard draw because their dispersion is tighter. Whereas others, I definitely remember the matchups for a big draw that I played were more, there were north south problems because there weren't as much, there's not as much stopping power, and yeah, there were left right problems too, bigger hooks. So yeah, I think there is validity to what you're saying, that you shouldn't be scared of neutral or getting to more neutral. And it's more of that, I think it's a myth that you're eliminating one side of the course with one shot shape. What you're really trying to do is eliminate, and Scott Fawcett does a good job of, I think, describing this. You're really trying to do is eliminate a double cross.
Well,
You
how
should
does he
miss
define
equally
that?
on both sides
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
playing really good golf, no
But
matter what shop you're playing.
how does Scott define a double miss? Because I've been chatting to Scott on this. I didn't
Yeah, I
want to
think
bring his name.
it,
Sorry, Scott, if you listen, if
it's
you're
well,
listening.
yeah, I think it means, let's say you're setting up for a fade with your driver, and sometimes you're going to close the face a little bit and it ends up 15 yards left of your intended target, and sometimes you leave the face open and it goes a little bit right of your target. It's fading most of the time. Most people will be like, oh well, I eliminated the left side of the course. And to Scott's point, and anyone else who has had less double cross, the double cross is just like a round killer. That's where you set up for the fade and you just pull hook it 50, 60, 70 yards left of your target. It's a duck hook. OB loses distance, whatever it is. Those are the misses that kill your rounds. And he argues that that's why people shouldn't shape it in both directions with the same club. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, but I think maybe I'm putting some words in his mouth, but I think that's his distinction between the double cross or missing equally on both sides with the same shot shape.
Yeah, Scott, if you are listening to this, we'll get you on
He's
at some
not.
point. I don't want to put I don't want to put words into, or if anybody listens to this and if they follow Scott, we love Scott. We've had him on the show. I don't always agree with everything he says. He doesn't always
How
agree
could
with
you? How
everything I
could you
say,
agree
but
with anything everyone says?
yeah,
One thing
95% of the
looked,
stuff we agree
I
on.
think I put this in my book, but DJ is a perfect example. So a guy who clearly plays a fade, and they say, oh, he eliminated the left side of the course. When he was the best driver of the golf ball, I forget what years it was, like 2018. He was like number one strokes gain off. Like he was just in his prime driving a real. If you looked at his shots, his misses, he missed equally on the left and right rough despite playing a fade. So how could you say this guy who has this fade locked in, it's never turning over, he still missed I think he hit like high 60% of his fairways. He still missed 16, 70% of his fairways to the left. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't aimed there.
So
There might be
yes,
some
the
noise in that
occasional
data,
double
but like,
cross.
yeah, that's, a very good driver of the ball or any shot you're going to hit. If you're missing 80% on one side, you either are not playing the right shot shape, you're not aiming appropriately. So the idea of eliminating one side of the course can be troublesome as like this myth, like that you're never going to miss left if you play a fade. Well, then if you hit it to the right every single time, then that's not good either.
Yeah. In terms of definitions, as I understand it, a double cross would be something like the spin axis comes out different to how you intended it. So you tend to hit a fade, a
Yes.
right spin axis, and it comes out a little left spin axis. Now, the magnitude of that, whether it's like you said, if you said a 60-yard double cross, and yeah, that's going to be horrendous. But also, you could say, well, even if it comes out your desired spin axis, when I was a big drawer of the golf ball, my big fear was not the big push hook, but my big fear was the pull hook that went
Yeah.
60,
Yeah.
70
Yes.
yards farther left than I wanted it to. So it's whichever direction you hit it, whether it's a double
Exactly.
cross or on the side of your path, a big miss is a big miss.
Yeah, I think when I was trying to play a draw with my driver, I was okay with leaving the face two open because you don't lose a ton of distance. It's a bit of a block or a straight shot and you miss it right, whatever. But yeah, to your point, the pull hook where the face closes down, no spin, lose a ton of distance, left going left, like that's the shot that no one likes.
Yeah. And I mean, technically, the more neutral you make your path, if you get your path like 1 degree in to out, and you're going to play a predominant draw shot, if you hit 100 shots, more of them will curve left. But you'll also then get more double crosses under that definition, right? Where the spin axis
Yeah.
comes out, falls to the right. Yet, does that make you worse? Not necessarily.
No,
My
no, because they
argument is
won't
that
be
it doesn't.
extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they won't be as extreme off of your target as your point you're making, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I suppose I should start this whole thing by saying that I'm not for more neutral shots. Okay, I'm just arguing the case that they're okay. I'm
Hmm.
also not for shaping it one way every single time, hitting 100% of your shots right to left. I'm agnostic to those things. What I am
Hmm.
for is finding out what works best for the individual player, as close as we can get to that through testing and things like that, and then using that on the golf course. That's what I'm for. But often, when you do social media posts, you'll say things like, hey, everybody, this is the evidence that neutral is okay. And people say, I can't believe you're against drawing it or fading it. All the pros draw fade it. It's like, no, that's a false dichotomy. You can be for, both can be true at the same time. So yeah, my general answer to people is find out which one gives you a tighter dispersion and use that more often. There's also, I know you mentioned there the idea of shaping it both ways. I think there's sometimes this gets lost in the mix in these discussions as well, is there's a difference between intentionally shaping it both ways. So someone standing up there and saying, right, I'm going to try and draw into this left pin. Then there's a right pin on the next hole. I'm going to try and fade it in. That's what I call an intentional shaper of the ball versus what just comes out in your normal distribution. So if a neutral player, say someone had a zero path, they would probably have a mix of spin axes. Some would fall to the right, some would fall to the left. It'd be about 50-50. That is not someone who's intentionally shaping it, or you could say their intentional shape there is neutral, but we never hit our intentional shape.
Yeah, and I think it depends. Are you a player who just sees targets and hits, or are you a player who sees target and shapes? So I think I've been both of those players. I used to be, I see target and shape it with draw. Now I see target and just hit. Sometimes the face is open, sometimes it's closed. It could be a little pull draw, a little push cut. I'm not trying to actively shape it anymore. I'm just looking at a target. And this is something I'm still working through, and hopefully this resonates with other people. Like, let's say you're set up on the right side of the tee box and the target's more to the left. That's kind of like putting your body lines almost in a fade pattern sometimes, and vice versa. And sometimes the course pulls you in a certain direction, so you're not necessarily trying to shape it, but just sometimes maybe your alignment and the way you're looking at things can do that as well. Something I've noticed as the swing path is not as extreme. So yeah, I think some people just see the course differently. They look at something and like, yeah, I'm going to carve this in there with a nice tight draw, and someone else will just be like, yep, that's my target. I'm swinging, and we'll see what comes out.
Yeah. And I've been both players as well. Earlier on when I was playing kind of two handicap-ish, I was a big drawer of the golf ball. I saw everything move right to left. I intended to play that shape. Now I would class myself as more of a neutral player, or that's certainly what I practice more getting towards. So now I just pick a target and hit towards it. And so often people ask me, are you trying to draw it or fade it into you? And I say I'm trying to hit it straight.
Yeah, I don't
And
know which ones. I don't think there's a right answer because it's golf, obviously, but you should know which one of those you are, I guess would be the takeaway, possibly, is that you don't want to be someone who's constantly stuck in the middle. And maybe I'm trying to figure things out myself as I say this out loud, because that can become problematic. Because then you're not on the same page with yourself almost before the shot.
yeah, I guess the most right answer in the moment is the one that you perform best with. And I'll often run these
Sure, we
tests. I'll,
hope.
I'll hit draws. I'll hit draws of varying amounts. I'll try and sling it in there. On the range I'm practicing these things, I know it transfers to the course as well. So I'll try and sling it in there, hit a subtle draw, hit a really tight draw, and then I'll almost try and fade it, and I'll see which one comes out best. And the closer I get to neutral, the tighter my dispersion tends to get. If I try and so, the closer I get to neutral, the more of a mix of spin axes I get as well over 100 shots. The more it sometimes falls to the right, sometimes falls to the left. If I'm trying to sling it in there, I can do that, 99% reliability, but my dispersion gets wider. So that's not a
Yeah.
better option for me. Yes, I'm missing one way. Yes, the shot is coming out how I see it, but it's a wider dispersion. So mathematically, it's not better.
Yeah, and that's, I think at the highest level of golf, that becomes more of a how much can I, you know, draw or like there are golfers at the pro level who do this. They see a back right pin and they're like, yeah, I'm fading in there. The stuff that Jack Nicklaus used to say. And I would say for most players, that's including myself, pretty much a pipe dream. Like if I tried to play golf that way, like actively shaping it to all these different targets, I know I would shoot much higher scores. I've got pretty good evidence at this point to show that to me. And I think the argument is that most players, whether it's Scott saying it or someone else, is like, if you want to play golf like the romantic way, where, we're carving it all over the place and it sounds great in theory, and then you actually try and do it and then compare that to like a more, I'm just going to hit it over here and maybe not try and do something special. And the latter is probably going to result in a tighter dispersion and lower scores for most players. Not that there aren't exceptions, there's always exceptions. And most of those exceptions, though, are at the highest levels of the game.
Well, yeah, you'd have to be equally good at fading and
Yes.
drawing
Yes. Which is
to
hard.
make it an advantage. And even then, what is the advantage necessarily? Say the distributions are pretty even on with both, which tends to be for most people. The only advantage of, say, fading it into a right pin would be that once it lands and drops, it spins maybe 2 feet, 3 feet more towards the target. So you'd
Yeah.
say, okay, your distribution is going to be 3 feet tighter to the target on average. Is that outweighed or negatively outweighed by a bigger dispersion by trying that shot? And for most
Yes.
people, that will be the case. Now, there are some elite players. I believe Sasho is also good at drawing and fading. I've run tests where I have that outcome as well. My fades and my draws are as tight. So potentially that is an option for me, but I still don't choose to use it.
I think Xander Schauffele is an example of a player who's talked about doing it. And even, I don't know if Chris Como talked about that when he was on the show because he works with him, but I've heard him talk about saying, how he got to the next level and won majors was, he works it in both directions based on pins, and he can do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say that's an aberration with the modern tour player because you don't hear a lot of tour play like, Scheffler. Scheffler's an example who predominantly plays a fade, but you will see some draws from him on the golf course. Again, I don't know if they're intentional, if it's just moving ball position, something simple like that. But he looks like a fade player. So Morikawa, who's a tremendous, he had issues for years where he lost his fade and it was drawing and they couldn't figure it out, but he wanted to play a fade. So again, for everyone listening to this, it's mostly irrelevant because those are like the top 0.001% of golfers.
Yeah, I think that's where we definitely agree with Scott, is for the majority of people, picking the one best intention. Again, I don't want to say shape because that assumes every ball moves that way, but picking the one best intention and using that. Where I suppose we differ from Scott, or where I differ from Scott, is that I would class neutral as a viable intention. If
He probably
intending to
wouldn't. Yeah.
produce, if
Maybe we can
intending to
ask him.
produce a neutral shot pattern produces a tighter dispersion, then I'm okay with that.
I don't think he would care either. He's kind of loosened up a bit. I've heard him say lately, like, you want to draw it with your driver and fade it with your irons, cool, go for that. It's just mostly, I think his thing is the double cross thing, like removing those big misses from the equation is really what you're chasing, because when you hit those shots, it undoes all of the good work that you've done. No different than, let's say you were a stock trader or something and you had this great trading record and the one mistake you made undid it all. Like, and that can happen in golf. Like, you can make these big mistakes that disproportionately destroy your rounds, like hitting ball OB, stuff like that. Like, you can lose strokes quickly when you make the wrong call.
But again, if we're defining double crosses, it has the wrong a different spin axis to what you want. Then if I get someone, say I get someone
Well,
from
call it
100%,
big
right?
miss. Then
Okay, yeah,
huge
yeah.
miss is really what's saying. Yeah.
But then that will come out in the dispersion pattern. If you run a
Yes.
bunch of testing with that, trying to hit draws, trying to hit big draws, big fades, small fades, more neutral, you'll see the big miss come out in that. The assumption I think a lot of people make is that shaping it, or intentionally shaping it, reduces a big miss. And I would argue it just doesn't. If anything, I mean, you could say it increases it, the big miss, because
Yeah.
the more you're aiming
You could do.
offline away from the target, I mean, if that ball goes where you want, where you're aiming, then, or where you're trying to start the ball, then. But even then, I'll go back on myself with that. It's all down to your dispersion size is down to the face variance around that path. Okay, so if you a couple of examples here. Say you get a drawer of the golf ball who has a +6 path, right? The path is 6 degrees in to out. And then they've got a face window. Sometimes their face is +2, sometimes it's +6, and they hit a push. So there's variance of kind of draw, overdraw, pushes in there. Their dispersion will be 25 yards wide at about 160 yards. Now, say you take player B, a neutral player, someone who has a 0 path, and their face window is 2 left, 2 right. So the same size of face window, same standard deviation, let's just say. Their dispersion is also 25 yards wide. So making the ball curve one way doesn't magically reduce dispersion. Now, I know all the caveats people throw out is like, yeah, but it's easier mentally to draw it in. For some people, it's not. I find it easier to aim at my target mentally, to look at my target and try and hit towards that target and have it fall either side. That produces a tighter dispersion. Other players will find it easier to visualize the ball coming in, but that will manifest itself in the dispersion size. All these variables, known and unknown, will come out in that dispersion size.
And I think that is really what the double cross statement is that if your face variance is much bigger when you try the shot shape or the stock shot that is outside of your realm, if your face variance is much larger, no
Yeah.
good. That's essentially the argument, saying if I go in there trying to play a big fade and a big draw, and that big fade, my club face control just sometimes I'll hit it, but when I don't do it, like, it's bad. Versus the draw, the face control tolerance is much tighter. Therefore, you get tighter dispersions over 50 to 100 shots. So it all comes back to that bigger picture thinking of, I don't want to know what happens when I pull this off. Because, yeah, if you pull the shot off, then you get what you want. You faded it into that back right pin. I want to know how often when it doesn't work, how far am I missing and how often am I missing? And that's where golfers get caught up because sometimes their memory is very hazy and they remember those like 3 or 4 good shots they hit, but then forget about the 20 other ones and that didn't make it worth pursuing that shot shape. And
Yeah.
you could parallel this to a lot of things in golf and strategy. Like, should you chase angles off the tee? Should you, get cute with wedges around the green? And it's like when you pull it off, great. But when you don't pull it off, what's it costing you? Because again, golf disproportionately punishes you because we're playing a game counted by strokes. Maybe not in match play, but everything else, the strokes can pile up very quickly when you make that big mistake. That's this calculus is what it really is in my head.
Yeah, I had a point and I lost it.
Gone.
Yeah, some of the things that I've got in the intro here are, relative to what I've put here. So, some of these discussions we're talking, sometimes people talk relative to the flag. So, are you hitting a neutral shot relative to the flag? And so, yeah, in that case, if the pin is tucked on the left, you probably don't want your shot distribution evenly centered over that flag. So the other thing is then the target, right? If the target is probably going to be for most people close to the middle of the green. Maybe
Hopefully.
sometimes if there's water on the left, the target might be to the right side of the green. So, we can talk about these discussions, whether you're shaping, fading, drawing, or hitting more neutral towards a target. And that's how I tend to talk about these things. You could also talk about, your shot pattern relative to your aim. And so it goes into all these different definitions. The definition of flag is obvious. The definition of target, I would say, is where you want the ball to finish on average or your median. So I think Scott would call that the center of your shot dispersion pattern. And then aim. Aim for me is like me and you might have the same target, right? Center of the green. But I might be aiming at that center of the target. You might be aiming slightly to the right of it and seeing it draw
And
more
that's
left.
Yeah, and that's the difference between the players we mentioned before, the player who sees shot shape and the player who just sees target and goes.
Yeah. Or even it
But there's
depends
probably a
on.
third option in there too.
Yeah, well, it depends on where your miss is relative to your aim. So if you tend to miss to the left, say 5 yards, 10 yards to the left, if you hit 100 balls on the range and you hit some good shots, but all your misses are to the left, you look at the average and it's 10 yards to the left, then your aim point when you're on the golf course should be 10 yards right of your target. Right,
Yeah,
so you
I
should have a target that's middle of the green, but you should mentally be trying to hit to it. You should almost imagine your range flag is 10 yards right.
yeah, I mean the way I'm playing right now, I think my aim and target are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't see them that differently. But and again, that's probably a less curvature thing. But again, some people there's body alignment issues, where you start the ball and where you want it to finish. Some people don't stop and think about this, and maybe when they do, it could trip them up. But there could be, I see so many players. I know we've done episodes on alignment that I know that their target and alignment are just so far off. Like you're standing behind them on the tee box, and you're like, hold on a second, let's just take a second here and point this golf club where your like shoulders and feet are aimed because it's like 80 yards to the left, and you're like, where are you trying to hit it? They're like, over there. I'm like, well, you are not lined up even remotely close to that. Do you know that? And they're like, no, I had no idea. It's happened to me with my putting alignment where I was, like 45 degrees closed with my shoulders and had no idea. But that can be low hanging fruit for a lot of players when they actually kind of deconstruct their aim and target and what their body lines are doing.
Yeah, you can get really into the weeds with it. I like getting into the weeds with all those things. You obviously have flag,
Only if
you
it's an
have.
issue. Like if you're a golfer who like has problems, but like I'm trying to hit the ball over there and it's not going there. Like these are the things you need to look at independently. Like where am I
Well,
aimed? Where am I aligned?
it's
What's the
even
difference between the two?
yeah, it's even important for when you're keeping stats, and this is something that, lots of stats trackers don't have, is like where is your miss, but what's it relative to?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like Arcos is going to use flag a lot, which is valuable. All these things are valuable information. But if your target is the middle of the green and you hit the middle of the green and the flag is 30 foot left, goes down as a 30-foot miss. But you hit your exact target. You hit it where you wanted it to. There's recording it. I often do recording relative to aim. So relative to where someone is mentally trying to hit it. So if I ask someone on the range, aim at this 150-yard marker out there and hit shots towards it. I want you to try and hit that. And then we look at it. If their average pattern is 10 yards left of that, then we can say, well, on the golf course, you need to aim 10 yards right of your target. Or
Yeah.
we try and fix it, but one of those is easier in the short term, and both are viable options. And there's even adjusted aim. So, you've got your target. Say we got the target middle of the green. Say you got that person who tends to miss to the left. Well, they need to change. They need to aim 10 yards right of that middle of the green in order to get the majority of shots on there. But then what if there's wind there? Or if the wind is, if the wind is blowing left to right, they might be able to aim closer to their target now. But if the wind is right to left, their aim has to shift even farther right to compensate for that wind, to allow for that wind. If that gets super complicated, think of putting. The target in putting is the hole. There's no water hazards on there, so we don't have to bias our target anywhere. So the target is generally the hole on a putt. But where you aim is going to be a product of, what your miss tendency is. Maybe, if you tend to miss a lot of putts left, you might want to aim at the right side of the hole, or, you adjust that then for the break. Obviously, if the break is right to left, everybody has the same target, but you might have to aim in different places. And even depending on how you see break, I mean, technically everybody should be starting it on the same line, but how they see it is a mix of variables as well. So yeah, this stuff gets super complicated. I tend to record things relative to aim. If people want just a bite-sized chunk from that, I tend to record where the shot finishes relative to aim. And I got certain systems doing that.
I think that's probably best for most players because that's kind of like start direction type stuff would be my guess is how most people how aim manifests itself. But yeah, I think again you could trip yourself up when you actually think about where am I aiming and what's my target. Are they the same and are they different? And I think a lot of players would have different answers to that question if they stopped and thought about it.
Yeah, there's even, let me give you a question. A person fading into a target,
Yeah,
where do they miss, left or right?
if they're fading into their target,
Yeah,
I
fade.
don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
no
know.
one knows. Yeah,
How
it's
would
a
you
trick
know?
question in a way.
Yeah.
But some people are very confident at
They
this.
would
So
say to the right. Yeah.
yeah, I often post. It's an old blog post, and I post the image of there's a flag on the left, bunkers on the left, and a huge amount of green to the right. And I say, what's the best shape here? And you get some people who are adamant, you've got to start it right. Got to start it at the center of the green and draw it in, just like Nicholas, because your
Yeah,
miss with a draw is going to be to the right. Your miss is
it's
going
like
to
they
be on
get
the
to
middle of the green.
it's like they get to draw the shot shape with a crayon out there and just be like,
Yeah,
that's where it goes.
place it. Whereas other people are in the camp of, well, you've got to fade it in. You've got to aim at the pin and try and fade it towards the middle of the green, because if you hit it straight, you're on the pin. But any amount of fade, if you overdo it, you're on the green. Both of those are good logic, but
Sure.
ultimately it depends on what a person's miss pattern is
Yeah, their face
relative to their
variance.
target for a given shot shape. Now, here's an interesting thing. When I do my fades and my draws, when I fade it towards a target, my miss is about 5 yards left on average.
Which most
Now, when,
people would be shocked by, right?
yeah, those people who think that you overdo a miss, overdo a curvature as you miss. So, yeah, when I fade it, I tend to miss 5 yards to the left. When I draw it, I tend to miss 5 yards to the left as well. So both of my patterns tend to be shifted to the left. Whether I'm fading it or drawing it towards a target, they both tend to be shifted
Because
to the
you have
left
a
slightly.
close because you have a
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, my face tends to be more closed than I want it on average. I tend to have a hard time opening the face, whether that's a mental thing, comfort thing, whatever. And so yeah, it's a myth that fades are going to underfade as a miss or overfade as a miss. You have to test and see what's right for you. I've had players who, when they fade it or draw it, their miss tends to be over curvatures. So their fades miss to the right, their draws miss to the left, and vice versa. I've had under curvers of the ball. Their drawers tend to miss to the right, and their fades tend to miss to the left. And I've had players like myself who are a mix and the reverse mix as well. So it's, you just have to test these things for yourself. But ultimately, once you've done that testing, you then pick the one with the tightest dispersion and you overlay that onto the target.
We're just all chasing tighter club face control
Yeah.
in the end, because the two-way miss thing and the, oh, you'll always miss to the right with the fade, and just think of it this way. We and you've said this a million times. You've seen so many golfers on launch monitors at this point, and many other coaches who've come on here have said the same thing. Swing path tends to be way more consistent. So if you're someone who fades it, and let's say your swing path will mostly be between 4 to 7 degrees out to in, and then how open or closed your face is, are you going to, you could pull hook some of those, you could pull fade some of those, you could hit them perfectly, fading 5-10 yards to the right, or you could leave the face wide open and it's a right starting right fade, and all of those shots will miss left of the green, on the green, way right of the green, all over the place. So everyone's got a two-way miss technically. If you wanted to land the ball on the left center of the green and you hit 500 shots, there will be tons of shots that miss to the left and right. Everyone's got a two-way miss. It just might look the same in the air in terms of your curvature.
Well, even people
Right?
define two-way miss as different things. Is it, like we said, is it two-way miss relative to shape? Mix
Yeah,
of spin
yeah.
axes.
I mean,
There's people
ultimately, it should
say,
be judged relative to target, is my belief. Like
yeah,
that's
relative to
it.
target. But if your target is the middle of the green, lots of the stats won't show that as well. So you might
Yeah,
have a two-way
yes,
miss relative to flag as well. Or even some people, I saw the definition the other day of relative to big misses. So, oh, my big miss is left, but I don't have a big miss to the right. And that's a valid thing as well to think
sure,
about when going through these
absolutely.
things. I don't think we should build our strategies based on outliers. I think we should base it on the 95% of shots that
Yeah,
we
if
hit.
you've, yeah, I know some players who I've seen like have a big scary miss to the right with their driver that just kind of comes up once in a while. Like you just kind of have to live with that. If it happens, like again, you trying to aim away from that most of the time will result in more suboptimal targets than the few
Yeah.
times you just, this is golf. You have to live with a big miss sometimes, and we're trying to minimize it. And there are absolutely ways you can, whether it's impact location or face control, but it's not something that you got to play with. Being like, if I know I pumped 2 drives out of 100 way right, like it's just not something you have to account for in your target selection. It's just kind of festering around in the back of your brain,
Yeah, if your
which is
big
fun,
miss
right?
is one every 20 shots, you hit one
Yeah.
60 yards left. It's pointless going out there aiming 60 yards right into
Yeah.
the
Right.
trees to
Yeah.
allow for that
Exactly.
one big miss to come out. You just have
Yep.
to accept that,
You got to
okay,
live with it.
occasionally it's going to happen. It's just, you hope it doesn't happen when there's OB left. You hope there's
Ye-
another fairway over there. And that
sure.
accounts for some of the variance of score as well. Lots of people are like, why is my score so random? So you might hit it the same day to day. You might hit one out of 20 shots that goes 60 yards left, and on day one you're in the center of a opposing fairway, and day two you do that shot, the same outcome, and you're at OB, and it takes three off the tee.
No one talks about this a lot, but a lot of players' handicaps are dependent on the courses they play. So my home course is very generous off the tee. You get a lot of players who can get away with a lot more there, and you put them on a tree lined course that's tighter, and they might not perform as well. So a lot of it is course dependent. And with like, what is your big miss or what's the weakest part of your game? It might be short game. And if you play a course with tougher green complexes and you get exposed there because of it, there's definitely a course fit at different levels of this game. I think that becomes less of an issue as people get better, because what game travels well? A player who can keep it in play off the tee and hit good iron shots. I feel pretty confident you can play any golf course in the world pretty well with that game.
Yeah, and some of it is just random as well. Like
And
we
randomness too.
we
Yeah. And
we
randomness too.
cannot control what shot comes out. We have patterns for sure. So say for example someone hits six shots and three of them are flush and three of them are fat. You can't really control which one comes out. You can change the bias. You can make it so, okay, two were thin, two were fat, two were centered. But where you do those is important as well. I was looking at someone's Arcos stats the other day and going through their round. And one of them, he shot a really high score. One of them was a little better. And I noticed on 3 holes, they had fatted 3 shots, or they'd hit it way short on 3 attempts on both different rounds. But on one round, all of those, there was no water short. So they fatted it. They hit the same
They got away
bad
with
quality, but they're
Yeah.
just in the middle of the fairway. They can
Yeah.
hit the shot on. Cost them maybe half a shot, maybe a little bit more. The other one, they did the same 3 fat shots, but there was water each time short on those ones. Just happened to happen.
Yeah.
You
It's
know, some people would say,
and
"Oh yeah, but the
randomness.
water caused them to
Yeah.
hit it short." It's like maybe, maybe not. So you know, this is why there's so much variance in our scores from day to day. Is that you do the same thing on a different hole, and it could be a completely different outcome.
Yeah. You don't know when the tree's going to stop it, when the water's there. Yeah, there is a lot of randomness to this game that's very hard to overlook, but it is randomness and it's not personal. It's just you hit thousands of golf shots, you're going to get tons of great break, well, what seem like great breaks and what seem like bad breaks, and it's just course fit, hole fit, cold hard physics, wind changing, bounces. It's we take it very personally, but it's a lot of it is random, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is why 5 shots either side of your average is perfectly acceptable. I
Yeah.
know so many
And
golfers who are like,
and
"I'm a
it's
73 shooter," and it's like, not every day, you're not.
yeah, and it's why we can't tell. It's like literally impossible for a golfer to recount their round to another golfer without telling the story of how it all unfolded, being like, "Oh yeah, I made that 7, but you got to hear how it happened." And I'm guilty. It's just what we do. It's kind of the camaraderie of the game.
Yeah, yeah. On the topic of one-way miss versus two-way miss as well, you should have a two-way miss. Really. I
Yes.
mean, that's more
Yeah.
optimal. It tends to be, if you look at the stats, and if people don't believe me, go and look on pgatour.com and you can actually see the stats there. They have a statistic for fairway miss percentage. I don't think it's officially called that, maybe something else. But yeah, you'll see usually the best drivers of the ball. If you look at guys like McIlroy, they tend to be very close to 50-50 with their
Yeah.
misses. Yeah, I'm not
That
saying they
means
miss
you're
every
aiming.
shot,
Yeah,
50
but
left, 50 right.
that means you're picking the right targets, you're aiming well, and you're have really good club face control. Because yeah, if McElroy was missing 20% on one side and 80% on the other, like that'd be a disaster. He'd be,
Yeah,
he wouldn't be the top 3 driver of the game.
yeah, exactly. You know, there's usually a safer side on each hole. Not always, but usually. If there's out of bounds on the left, you want your miss to be more to the right on average. You know, when we had Steve Williams on, talking about Tiger, he said that you would aim at different parts of the fairway. You'd
Yeah,
aim
you
at the
have to
right side of the
shift.
fairway if there was crap on the
That is
left.
the easiest takeaway from Brody's book and what players have known from for a really long time. I mean, Hogan at Carnoustie with the OB left on that par 5, like if there's trouble on one side and mostly innocuous rough on the other, you adjust your aim away from it because it's weighted math. Your lower expected score will be from aiming away from trouble when you can. Now, sometimes you can't do that. I get the emails being like, "Well, I have a tree line golf course with OB on both sides on every hole." I'm like, "Well, you've just got a hard golf course. You got to aim down the middle. There's nothing I can
Yeah,
do for you there."
exactly. Yeah. Even when going into flags, you know, if there's pin on the left, trouble on the left,
Yeah, stay
two-way
away.
miss is not a good thing there. If you look at the
Yeah,
stats of pros hitting, say you took 100 pros going into that hole, pin on the left, trouble on the left, you'd see the miss is like 95% right. It's not two-way because it
yeah.
has to
Well,
fit.
because you have a two-way miss, therefore you need to shift further to the right. So if you adjusted your aim to the right edge of that green, knowing that there was so much trouble to the left, you will miss some left of there and they will go on the green, and you'll miss some to the right of it and you'll have a reasonable up and down. And that's better than dunking it in the water or OB, whatever the trouble is over there. So
Yeah.
that is, the truth of, taking your medicine and adjusting away. It's you're recognizing that you will leave the club face closed, you will leave the club face open sometimes, that therefore your miss will be on both sides.
Yeah. That's where also then you get into definitions. It's like players will say, yeah, well, he's aiming at the middle of the green now, but he's missing both sides of that. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's absolutely fine to do that. or he's missing one side, maybe one side of that. But even then, you don't see players. If the target is the middle of the green, you'll see an even distribution around that usually as well. Like I said, mine tend to be slightly 5 yards left of that. But then
One
I'd
of the
say I'm
worst parts, yeah, one of the worst parts of watching golf on TV is the announcers review shots as if they finished where the player meant it to finish. And they're like, oh, he was really aggressive there. Oh, he played that concern. Like they have no idea where they were trying to hit the shot. I mean, they have a decent idea half the time, but you don't know if, you had that front left pin and they hit it right over it on top of it. It's like, wow, he really went after that one. Meanwhile, the guy's like, oh yeah, this was 30 feet right. I wanted no part of that pin. I just happened to pull it a little bit and didn't hit it as well. That's why watching golf on TV can be very bad for your strategic decisions and expectation management.
yeah.
You have no idea what their intention was. You're guessing.
So yeah, the only way you can have a true one-way miss relative to a target is either have the world's tightest dispersion pattern. It's just not, less than what did Scott say? It's about 60 yards with a driver, 60 yards
Yeah,
wide, pro
65 is
dispersion.
like the pro dispersion with the
Yeah, and
driver.
even then they hit it out of that occasionally. Or you just use suboptimal aim points. Like you could in theory have a one-way miss by aiming 70 degrees to the left every time, and your misses, you'll never hit the right side of your course, but you'll also never break 70. You never break 100
Yeah,
doing that.
it's a flawed. It really is a flawed way. It's easy to think that way, but when you actually go down that rabbit hole, it's a flawed way of playing golf. Like you want to miss on both sides.
Yeah. And
That's a
even if
good
people
thing.
say that's an argument to extremes, aiming 70 yards left, use a different number. It still works out the same. If you use a suboptimal, if you aim in a certain place to eliminate one side of the golf course, it's suboptimal.
You got to play the whole course. Like
Yeah.
I know that I know what it's like to feel anxious, and you look on one side, you see trouble everywhere. Like you cannot. You have to at some point embrace it and just understand that you don't have control over where this ball lands most of the time, and playing too scared and too conservative at times, like there's a time to kind of step on the gas, and there's time to pump the brakes a bit. But if you're always pumping on the brakes and just playing away from everything and fearful all the time, like you will not play your best golf. It's kind of like I played this way for a long time, just like the turtle in its shell type of golf, I would say, where you're just like, I'm scared of everything. Like I want control of everything. It's really a control issue, I think.
And on the topic of control, like you said, we can't control which outcome comes out, but we can control relative the dispersion. What is it?
Yeah,
Scott says with a 7 iron or so, it's like a 40-yard dispersion with irons, 40 yards.
it's bigger than most people would expect.
Yeah, so assume you got 20 yards left to 20 yards right. Well, I mean, on that topic, if you wanted to ensure that every or 95% of the shots curve one way to get into that dispersion. I've done the math on this, and you'd have to have, well, the geometry, that you'd have to have a path of like +7 in order to make sure that every shot curves the same way. Now, is that optimal? I don't believe so. I mean, can you play
Yeah,
good golf with a +7 path? Yeah, I'm sure. McIlroy's
Bubba
probably like that with
Watson,
his
Bubba
driver.
Watson, Bubba
Yeah,
Watson has a couple of major championships. Yeah, but
yeah.
he's an outlier, or was in the modern game.
Yeah. So is it possible? Yeah. But when you look at the pros, very few pros I see are like +7, -7 with their path. So they've got to be
TrackMan should
hitting a
do
mix
a
of
yeah.
spin axes to get
I
there.
wish they would do. I don't know if anyone from the TrackMan world listens to this podcast, but you know how they have the driver report that comes out every. It'd be very, maybe this exists. I don't know, but it'd be cool to see like typical club path and face angle variation amongst pros and like the tolerances there. I think that'd be really interesting to see with like a 7 iron or a 5 iron, something.
I do see it. So with the best players I've had on GC Quad, the path tends to have about a half a degree standard deviation. And the face usually is double that, so about one degree standard deviation. Those are the
Yeah.
best, most consistent players that I
But
see.
it'd be amazing to see like Scheffler probably has generational face control, probably like top
You'd be
three of all time would
surprised.
be my guess.
The thing is, right, with golf, the differences are so minuscule.
Yeah.
the best
And
in the
in
world might
percentage
have a
wise,
variance. Oh, yeah, I suppose as a
yeah.
percentage wise, you could say it
So
might be
like, yeah,
point 0.1 of a
he
degree
might
better.
be, yeah, but that might make him 30% better than like the median player on tour, but they're all within
Yeah.
like a very tight range to begin with compared to like mortal golfers.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what makes them so great is like that minuscule quarter tenth of a degree control and face is the reason why he made $65 million last year and someone else made two on the
Yeah.
PGA Tour. It's
I think
crazy
that's
when you really
important
think about
to
it.
I think it's important to know that from both ends of the spectrum. Like I said, the difference is very small. And what I'm talking about
Yes.
is like an absolute amount. What you're talking about is a relative amount, as a percentage. Like point 0.1 of a degree is a very small amount, whereas a percentage of 1 degree is 10%. So it's quite a big jump. And so, I think it's important from one side to understand that the difference between your best and your worst shots, as we've talked a million times, are just small changes. So everybody often thinks, well, I have to completely overhaul my swing to get better. And for some people, that might be true. But for many, it's just a case of, well, how do I shave off that point 0.1 of a degree? And usually the best answer to that is keep doing what you're doing, do more of it, and stop trying to seek that shiny object that opens up more variance.
Well, and in relation to this topic, shot shaping, that's the question you have to ask yourself is like me pursuing, I want to hit a draw. And is your pursuit of that actually giving you something? Like sometimes you get caught up in the idea and you don't really stop and think about it and look at the results. It's just something you want to do like this. And I've even heard tour players say this. They were like, man, I chased a fade for years because I thought it would be so cool for stopping power on the greens, but I just couldn't hit it. So I had to go back to my draw because that was my stock shot that gave me the tightest dispersion. So this happens everywhere up the level of the ladder. And yeah, for a beginner or intermediate player, it's more of obviously tightening that left to right window, that dispersion, because at that level, like you're trying to reduce your swings off the tee as much and with irons as well. And yeah, you got to kind of stop and do these little experiments. If you can on the range, pay attention on the course. As you said, I think tracking your misses relative to your target, your intentions is important. But that's the type of analysis, if you like doing that stuff, that gives you these answers. Like they're out there, right? You just got to be willing to do the work to find them.
Yeah, I mean, this is why these are such interesting information episodes because, like, when I'm thinking through a problem in golf, I like to approach it from at least three different angles. I look at what are the correlations. So, you could look at what do the best players in the world do? For example, all of them have forward shaft lean with irons, but then that correlation doesn't equal causation as well. You could see some pros do things, but it's not causing the effect. Um, so, I mean, an example of correlation not equaling causation, I suppose, would be no, I can't think of one. All right, so say,
Just got
um,
nothing.
yeah, there's so many examples. I mean, I can think of general examples of correlation and causation. So it's like global warming and pirates are negatively correlated. I don't know if you've seen that graph, right? So as
Yeah.
global warming's gone up, the amount of
Yeah. It's
pirates
the
have gone down,
pirates.
and so
Yeah.
okay, we need to bring more pirates back to stop global warming. It's like no, correlation is there, but not causation. I mean, you can certainly find things in golf like um, the amount of speed you create and kinematic sequence, for example, might correlate very well. But then the question is, when you try to intervene in the player, does it improve them? So, okay, Liam Mucklow's, I don't know what order these have gone out, these episodes, but Liam Mucklow talking about the grip study.
Yeah. That
Correlation.
will have come out already. So hopefully
Okay, so
someone
people
listened to that.
understand this. Yeah, so correlation is the best players in the world grip very tight with the left hand at the start and maintain some kind of consistency with it. Well, now, does that cause good play? Well, what you'd have to do now is go out with 100 golfers and tell them to grip it, and you could get them to grip it like a pro. But then some of them are going to get worse. So it's not necessarily the thing that causes it.
It's a byproduct of something else that shows up like when you measure it
Yeah. Or I
potentially.
know some people, no names mentioned, say that the best players in the world do a lot of blocked practice. where they stand there hitting the same shot over and over again. So that highly correlates. So you would say, okay, block practice, best players in the world do it. Let's all do it and we'll become the best in the world. You'll also have to look at
I
the
see
other side
everyone
of
doing, but
that.
yeah, I see plenty of regular golfers doing block
Exactly. The
practice. They're
worst
all
players
doing
in the
it.
world also do block practice. So it's also
Yeah.
correlated that side of it. So what you have to do is an intervention study. You have to take all these golfers, and you have to do one group of pros doing blocked, one group doing random, one group of amateurs doing blocked, one group doing random practice, and then you see which group gets better. That's a
Yeah, but
better
ultimately,
study.
like your whole golf game is one big intervention study when you think about it. Like you
Yeah.
are trying different things and hopefully finding the clues to the puzzle that are leading you towards better shots and better dispersion and better scores. And you're hopefully gravitating towards that. And our role as coaches and anyone else you consume information is to give you like these little nuggets where you can say, okay, try this, try spraying the damn face and seeing where you're hitting it and see where that takes you, or some basic stuff, or just understanding ball flight laws, or even hopefully this discussion on shot shaping. Or like, man, maybe I was overcomplicating this and like I don't need to like shape it both ways, or maybe I was thinking I needed to land it on one side of the course 80% of the time and that meant I was better. So yeah, you're essentially creating your own intervention study, because you are an n equal one. You are
Yeah.
a subject of one. You're not like anyone else.
I literally
I've
just
been
wrote
saying,
that down. Yeah.
I said on one of my last YouTube videos, for some reason I say unique snowflakes. I'm like, you're all unique snowflakes, and like 3 people responded on the comments. They're like, did you just call me a snowflake? And they were joking, but like I never stopped to think. I was like, because that's how I think of everyone's golf game. Like every snowflake is unique. It's this cool thing in nature. Like if you look at them under a microscope, they're all. And I truly believe about everyone's golf game. Yes, you can take generic info, but ultimately you need to figure out what's right for you, because you have unique matchups in your swing and the way you think on the course, and you need to figure out what's the right plan for you because it is unique to you.
Well, this is why I like to approach it from these different angles. The correlation one, we can look at population wide. If you get 100 golfers and you do this with them, there's going to be a certain percentage of people, and there'll be a bias there. So say, for example, you give 100 golfers a stronger grip position, the vast majority of them are going to hit more to the left. But there will be some in there who don't. And that's where N equals 1 studies come in. That's where you have to look at the individual as well. But at least the population wide study gives us a starting point to say, okay, this one has an 80% chance of working for you. And then obviously as studies get better, like we talked about with Liam, you say, okay, well, why did the strong grip make it hit it left for these players and not for these players? And maybe there's something physically there, maybe there's something mentally there, maybe there's another matchup that's stopping it, but it gives us a good starting point at least. But then there's also logic. I also approach it from logic. So I think in terms of like physics, geometry, or what a robot would do. I often run thought experiments with, okay, if a robot does this, what are the outcomes? And they're actually, I'm going to go into some Ping data now. So they've got a great article on it. If you Google Ping golf and then I think it's demand to curve it or demand to shape it. That's the title of the article. I can't remember exactly. But they did, I think it's robot studies, or they used their algorithms and they
Yeah, the straighter.
simulated.
Yeah, I've seen this one. It's good.
Yeah, they simulated either a straight shot, with some variance either side of it. So two-way miss, double cross every time. It's falling either side of it, versus drawing the ball every single time. And so in order to do that, they did a 6-degree closed face to path. Now I'll tell you, that is super extreme. That would be the equivalent of having a 12 right path and a face 6 degrees close to it with a 7-iron to get it on target. With a driver, I think it's even more than that. I think the path would have to be like 15 right. Face 6 close to it would produce on average big draws onto the target. But what they looked at was the variance.
I did it for a while. It's possible.
15? Wow.
No, I got to like 10 or 12 with my 7-iron, and
I
I
think I
was like
was
a
there.
I was like a 1 or 2 handicap at the time. I remember it was Kirk Aguri from Pete's Golf. When I first went in there, he looked at it and he was like, whoa. He's like, if you want to get better, he's like, you're going to need to do something about that. He's like, yeah, I'm sure you're playing okay now, but I was talking about wanting to like play better tournament golf. And he's like, and he's a great tournament player. He's like, not like that, dude. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I'll figure this out.
Uh, so yeah, they looked at this huge draw shot and they compared it to a more neutral spin axis, mix of spin axes, more neutral path. And what they found was the straight was longer. The straight drive was longer by 24 yards. Now, the 6 degree closed face to path was tighter. The dispersion was 12% tighter, but it was also 24 yards shorter. You know, the
Yeah. So
reason
the
why it's
strokes
tighter
gained.
basically is falling out of the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
I
yeah,
think
in
Chris
terms,
Brody was involved in that as
I think
well.
he
So
wrote
yeah.
well,
Well,
maybe not
it's
write it, but he did
the
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 data.
the family link there with the strokes gain data is lovely. I love that. You know, Mark is Chris's dad, and I love that both of them are in the
Is
golf
he? I
industry.
didn't
It's
know
so
that.
yes,
I didn't know
yes,
that. I
that's
don't even.
yep,
I bet that was even mentioned when we had him on the podcast, and I've completely forgot it. Sorry.
yeah.
But yeah,
Mark's very proud of him. He's doing wonderful work in the golf industry.
awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that was super extreme with the path, and even then the straight won on strokes gained. So they simulated, you know, fairways and how much the distance would gain them versus how much the dispersion would gain them, and they said that an average of 1.1 shots per round was saved by going the straight route. So that would be a logic or physics and geometry argument against shaping, at least in
Yeah.
terms of extreme.
But then the question is, how do I hit it straighter? Be like, great, I'm not a robot. How do I set it up so I hit this thing straighter now?
Well, both of those had the same phase variance around it. So
Yeah.
they're using the same, all the other variables are the same. All they did was just shift the path one side or more neutral.
Yeah.
When they also did a minimized version of that, something that's more realistic. They did something that was 2 degrees closed face to path. So much more realistic. I'd still say that's relatively extreme. With the drive, I'd produce a pretty big curve, about 25 yards of curve or so,
Yeah.
maybe even
Which
more at
no
300
one's doing
yards.
anymore at the highest levels with their driver.
Yeah, so 2 degrees face to path, and it was pretty even then. The straighter shot, I think, still won a little bit, but it was marginal, not even worth talking about really. I think it was like point 0.1 of a shot per round, not per shot, per round. So I mean, all that you would say logic wise, based on that, the straighter shot is winning out, especially when you compare it to the extremes. Now, some people will say, well, I'm not arguing for an extreme. And it's like, well, if you want every shot to curve right to left, you're going to have a pretty extreme
Yeah.
path. So that's
Yes.
not a
If
good,
you
you pick one
exactly.
side, basically.
Yeah. If you want to see the ball fall one way, then you're going to have to live with a more extreme swing path.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, that's the logic argument. So I think in terms of correlations, what do the pros do? What do the worst players do? Are there correlations there? Then we look at population wise, we look at individual level, we look at robot physics as well. Like I've done the physics, I told you earlier, the zero path with 4 degree face window versus the 6 degree into out path with the 4 degree face window. The outcome is almost identical. So it's
Yeah,
not
but I
it's not
think
worth thinking
the
about.
over the overarching theme that maybe you and I are saying anecdotally in our games and what like if you've got a 10 to 12 degree swing path and you're shaping it extreme, like you will likely play much better golf if you learn to neutralize that a bit
Yeah.
or a lot. Like
Especially gone.
it just that's going to work out for most players.
Especially if something else comes with it for free. And what I mean by
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
thinking
Face
about your
control.
own game. Your
Yeah.
in to out path also came with a super shallow angle of attack.
Yep. Yeah.
Now,
You got
when
other
you
benefits too.
neutralized the path, you also improved your angle of attack. You made it more negative, which probably helped you get, better strikes on the ball in general. And so that can reduce dispersion as well.
Yeah.
So all these
It's
things go
hard
into
to
the mix.
yeah, it's hard to play golf in extremes.
Yeah.
Some people can do it, but I think the people that can do it are more like maybe I'm wrong here, but I think they're more athletic freaks. Like someone like Bubba Watson. Like that guy's probably has hand. I don't know how you would measure hand-eye coordination like neurologically, but I bet he's off the charts. That he can just step up to a shot, shape it. You know, remember we had Ted Scott on, and when he remembers the first 2 years he was caddying for him, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to curve this one 30 yards with a 7 iron." He's like, "What?" He didn't even know how to caddy for me. He would just go up there and like just hit all these shots. Like that's not normal. Like you both 99.9% of golfers can't play that way.
There's such a mix of variables with this that goes into dispersion size, both a known and unknown. The known things are things like face and path variance. That will determine dispersion size. But the unknown things that influence that, things like confidence, feel, ability to hit that shot, which has many variables in itself, like how your body wants to work. Perhaps maybe for some people biomechanically they favor a fade. I'm sure lots of people with very stiff bodies and inability to separate lower and upper, maybe they want to come more over the top of it. Maybe that's just how they sequence it. Maybe there are other sports involved as well. Maybe you've got a tennis player who likes to hit topspin, and then they like to see the ball curve right to left a little bit more. That feels more natural to them. They can control it better. Again, we might not know all of these variables, but we can know the dispersion. And so that's where we've got these three levels of thinking that I do: the correlation part, the logic part, kind of robot mental tests. Lost the what are they called? Mental.
You lost your
Yeah,
pyramid.
yeah, logic based ones, and then actual testing. So that's the one. It's hard because I know Scott doesn't like this one either. He says
This whole
testing.
we're like this whole episode's in the shadow of Scott for some reason.
Well, I've been having a lot of discussions with Scott online. That's why. My argument is that we can test these things. So if I ask a player to hit a fade, hit a draw, try and hit a neutral, we'll see which one wins. Now, obviously, over one test, it might not produce great outcomes. But if you test it week after week after week, and then you take those tests on the golf course and look at the data, you can start to get a very clear picture of which one is better for you and veer towards that.
Your goal is simple in this game. I think this is one of my first blog posts, and I made this like very rudimentary picture on Canva. This is like probably like 2015. Like the whole goal of golf, not all of it, but let's say tee shots and approach shots. You've got two lines. You got a left line and a right line, and that let's call that your outer dispersion. You're just trying to shrink those babies. Like that's it. Like you're trying to get those lines closer together, and your scores will drop. And in the context of shot shaping or whatever changes you're introducing into your game, the question always has to be is like, is that making these lines come closer together and keep track of that? And if it is, then man, that's good. Then gravitate towards that.
The
That's
risk
an
of
oversimplified version of it.
At the risk of adding complexity to that. No, I agree with you. Shrink those lines, shrink the outer dispersion, but also overlay it correctly
Yeah.
to
And then you
a
gotta,
scenario in front of you. So
yes.
for example, imagine you run a test where get a player to hit a draw versus a neutral shot, and their neutral shot is centered. The pattern is centered, but spread out is like a 60-yard spread. And their draw has, say, a 30-yard spread. It's much tighter, but it's all biased to the left. Well, you would use the tighter dispersion there. You would use the draw, even though the average is to the left. You use that one, and then you get that player to pick aim points that are more to the right. So they're going to aim at the right side of the fairway and draw it in. Or, if you want to reverse that argument as well. So pick the tightest dispersion generally and overlay that correctly through good aim points, which sounds very difficult. I do have in my accuracy plan, I've got a lot of information on how to do that as well without a launch monitor, but that's a whole other episode.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of, I don't know if we're at the end here, but that kind of summarizes for me like shot shaping. Like that's it. Like if you want to do it, do less of it, like experiment with different shot shapes. Like you're ultimately gravitating towards those two things.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep it that simple versus sometimes you get caught up in what you want to see and maybe what you think is cool. Like I thought it was cool to hit a draw for a while. I thought it went further, but I realized the extremity of it was holding me back, so I needed to do some work on that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think the results have been better. And I would say for most people, like it's hard to live in extremes in this game. It just makes things harder. You have to be so much more tighter with your tolerances. You can't get away with as much when you live in the extremes in terms of a lot of things, but particularly with swing path and shot shaping.
I got two more points that should take us up to the 90-minute mark. So one of them is pros all curve it, or that's the thing that people say. Well, pros all curve it. I mean, technically everybody curves it, right? Because no shot is hit with a zero spin axis. So if you can hit 1,000 before you see it. So technically everybody curves it. But again, it's down to what is the ratio here? Are you 100 to 0 curving it one way, or you're more 25-75, or you're more 50-50. The Ping did another thing. I think this was actually in the same blog post, and they looked at better players versus worse players, and they saw that they looked at their average curve per 100 yards of carry, and what they found was a very clear correlation between level of play and the amount of curvature. And the better the player, the less they curved it, right? Which in many cases you'd say, well, duh, that's obvious, right? But yeah, the pros, they were looking at about 4 yards of curvature per 100 yards. So 4%. 20 handicaps were about 10 yards per 100 yards. 10 yards of curvature per 100 yards of carry. So about 10%, 4% versus 10%. Now, I know this is obvious, but it's not necessarily obvious, because you would say, well, okay, if there was an advantage to curving it specifically, why wouldn't all pros curve it exactly 10% every time, or attempt to do that? Because you could have a scenario where an amateur tries to hit straight and a bit all over the place, but a pro is, hitting a 20-yard curve every single time, or they're getting closer to that every single time. But they don't. They seem to curve it less. And so, this is a product of two things. Number one, yes, tighter face to path numbers, less face variance. We talked about that. Better players have less face variance. But it also, I mean, from a logic perspective, it's easier to produce less curve if your path is more neutral. So to highlight this, imagine player A is a drawer of the golf ball. Both of these have the same kind of dispersion. Player A is a drawer of the ball. They're trying to hit a 10-yard draw onto their target. Shot one, they push it 10 yards right. Shot two, they hit their exact draw they want, 10 yards onto the target. Shot three, they overcook it and they draw it 20 yards too much. So it goes 10 yards left. So their dispersion, they've hit 10 right, 10 left, but they've done a mix of curves to get there. The neutral player aims at their target. They start the ball on their target, or that's their attempt. Shot one, they hit dead straight, zero curve. Shot two, they hit 10 yards right. Shot three, they hit 10 yards left. A little bit of push fade, pull draw. Both of those players have 20-yard wide dispersion, but the neutral player, or I should say the drawer of the ball, had 50% more curvature on average. 30 yards of total curve if you take over those three shots, divided by 3 is 10 yards of average curve, whereas the neutral player had 0 curve, 10 yards curve, 10 yards curve. So they curved on average 6.66 yards. So 50% more curvature for the draw of the ball, even though dispersion was the same, outcomes were the same. So again, neither, actually in those cases, neither is better than the other. They would both, on a golf course, score the same, but the neutral player had less curve. Then when we look at the correlation, Ping says better players have less curve. So it makes sense that not only are they tighter with their face variance, but they're also probably more neutral with their paths as well. That can't be defined fully. There is a good argument against that, but I would say, based on looking at professionals versus amateurs, there are more amateurs with big paths and fewer pros with big paths.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've definitely changed. If I had a list of the things I've changed my mind on over the last 10 years, this would be one of them. I used to be like, oh, you can't. I was the, don't be neutral camp, right? And the answer is, I mean, again, different for everyone, but again, it's hard to dismiss your own personal experiences and biases in these things, and I've seen it in my own game, and it's been beneficial to me. It's just a matter of like, how do you now the next natural question is like, all right, how do we move my swing path from 12 to 4? Right?
Yeah,
How do
nail
I move
draw.
it from 8 to 2? Yeah, it's, I mean, I
That's an
just
easy one.
tried to hit a fade for 10 years, but yeah, it's a good option, right? It's a very good option. A lot of things are pointing in that direction. Doesn't mean you have to zero it out. I am zeroed out with my driver now completely. And I'm driving the ball better than ever, but I didn't necessarily try to do it. It just kind of happened.
Well, on that
I don't
topic,
know.
we're talking about the three different levels that I try and go through mentally: the correlation, the logic part, and then the testing. You also have to think about, there's some part of it is a prediction. This is the unknown. No one knows this. No one will ever know this. You could do studies to see, how the population moves, but you don't know on an N1 case. But if you are a 10-degree in to out, you might say, oh, the pros are closer to zero with their path. The logic, the ping studies and things like that, and the geometry of it says that closer to zero probably might hold some benefits as well. But you don't know then. That's the hard part. If I go from 10 to zero, there's going to be some disruption when you try to
Yeah.
do that.
And it
And
might
you
be just
don't
getting
know
to
whether,
five could be the answer. Like if you got to
yeah,
five, really good things would happen.
yeah. So when you're doing your testing, you may find out that right now, in this moment, you perform better with a 10-degree into out path. But you don't know
Yes.
what
Yeah.
it's going to be in the future as well. And when you try to make that change as well, you don't know, is this going to make me better? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. That's the unknown of golf coaching, and whether a coach is coaching you or whether you're coaching yourself.
Well,
Usually what
it's
I do is, as a coach, is if there is an extreme path and it comes along with problems that go with that, say for example
yeah.
someone's in to out and they have a very shallow angle of attack, then I would say, well, look, we can kill two birds with one stone here. I think this is worth making your swing more left because we're going to get more neutral path and better attack angle as well. So that's when I use that as a coach.
And this goes with any change in golf. What do you stand to gain? What do you stand to lose? How much can you play? How much can you practice? What's your current handicap level? Are you happy there? You might be happy there and it might be like fine. Like I'd be like, I'm shooting in the 80s every time with a 12-degree path or high 70s. And I love it. I'm happy here. Great. I'm not saying to change that. But other players, we get messages all the time from players who are really struggling and be like, I got this slice and it is killing me. And yeah, for that player, like, yes, they absolutely need to learn how to change that pattern
Mm-hmm.
because their game is just not like, I've got too many big misses off the tee. I'm losing distance. And it's a bit of a no brainer to walk down that path because the upside is so much higher than what they've got then. And I think this is a tough question, I think, for the, I would say, more advanced player, obviously, but not as hard of a question for more beginner to intermediate players because usually the upside is there if you haven't been playing this game long enough, or if you have and you just feel like, I just feel like I've never reached my potential and I'm ready to really take this on and I have the time and resources to try and make it happen.
Yeah.
You do the best with what your scenario is and make that judgment call.
Yeah. Again, I suppose the problem for amateurs would be, they would have a hard time shifting it. They may get more benefit from shifting it, but they've got less time to practice to make that
Yeah.
shift.
I mean,
Also,
it
their
took,
bodies might not be able to,
yeah.
physically.
I mean, I didn't wake up one day and go from 10 to 2 degrees in one. It took like 8 years.
Yeah.
Like it didn't happen overnight. It's just like half a degree, half a degree. I didn't even notice it. It was so slow.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, on the logic argument with that, I'm thinking of amateurs. There is a logic to getting more neutral in terms of, say you were a player who was 10 degrees out to in and your face was 5 degrees open to that, right? So you're hitting a
Good
fade
shots.
onto the
Yeah.
target, right? And so you
Yeah,
have
good
some
shots.
variance
Yeah.
around that. What tends to happen if you produce that exact mix with every single club through the bag, what you'd find is your driver slices to the right, your 7-iron goes on target, but your wedge pulls to the left. And I see
Yeah.
these
Cause
players all the time. They're like, oh, I hit it everywhere. And when I'm playing with them, but they're not seeing the pattern. I see the
yeah,
pattern and I
because
say to them, well, actually, you're not hitting it everywhere. Your drivers are all going right and your wedges are all going left.
yeah,
That's
because path
typical
is
of a
more
player.
dominant with more loft.
Yeah, and also it's got
With
less
start
time to
direction. Yeah.
curve. The ball's got
Yeah.
less time to curve, and the F is going 100 yards versus 300 yards. And also just the spin axis is less as well. If you produce, an open face to path, when you lower the loft, to lower the spin loft, the spin will tilt more to the right as well. So there's a few reasons why there's much more curvature with the longer club. So there's a logic or geometry based reason call to be more neutral. Now, it's not as big. I've actually run the
Excuse me.
numbers on it. It's not as big an effect as I thought it would be. So again, I don't think it overrides. If someone's better with a 10-degree out to in path, I don't think it'll override that by getting more neutral. But there's definitely a logic-based reason for it. The other one is distance loss, especially if you're a fader of the ball. If you're an extreme fader, you might have a tight dispersion doing that, but you're going to lose so much distance. Even with the ping study, when it was extreme, you lost a lot of distance by overdrawing it. Face 6 degrees close to the path, ball just falls out of the air. So we have to take those things into account as well. So different results with different clubs. With wind as well, actually, I was surprised with this. I ran some numbers using FlightScope Trajectory Optimizer. So we're actually going to get ping guys on to discuss this in more detail. They might have different answers to me, but according to the data I got from FlightScope Trajectory Optimizer, if you get a player who is a drawer and they miss one left, one right, one center, and then you get a neutral player who hits one right, one left, one center, and they have equal dispersion. Now, when you add wind to the mix, the dispersions don't get bigger or tighter for one. That actually surprised me. I thought there may be an effect where, say, okay, left to right wind, if you draw into that, I thought there may be an effect where the dispersion gets tighter or the opposite. It doesn't seem to be the case, at least according to the data I had. The caveat to that would be maybe bounce and roll. If you're fading it with a wind, for example, the carry dispersions might be the same, but then you'll get a lot more rollout, especially in high winds. And whereas it'll tend to stop dead, say you draw it against a wind, it'll tend to stop dead once it hits the green there. So there may be an advantage, and that is a call to maybe even shaping both ways. But again, if you've got the ability,
Yeah,
and if the
yeah.
dispersions are pretty equal, so that's a
At
very
what
select,
cost?
yeah,
At what cost?
0.01% of people probably fall into that category. Even downwind and into the wind, this was an interesting one. The outer sides of the dispersion. So say you have the drawer, the drawer who's hitting varying amounts of draw versus the straight player who's hitting push, pull. When you put them downwind or into the wind, downwind, the dispersion tightens for both. Into the wind, the dispersion gets wider for both. Pretty equal amount as well. There's no difference between them. So there's no advantage or disadvantage there, until you look at the middle shot, the most online shot. And the drawer will tend to miss more to the right, I believe, into the wind, and more to the left into the wind, and more to the right downwind. Whereas the straighter player will hit it straight in both. So there may be a very slight advantage again to hitting more neutral. So there are some logic-based arguments for hitting more neutral. Are they huge? No. I'm not going to argue that they are, not to the point where I'm going to push everyone towards neutral. But are they there? Might they be worth exploring and looking at? For the elite players, yeah, possibly. What else do we have? We've got wind. Oh, play your natural shape. This is a big one. Probably one I'll finish on. I used to think this until I started testing with players. I used to think, well, your natural shape is going to be your best one. So if you are a natural drawer, and how I define that is if you turn your brain off and you just hit balls, maybe someone puts you in a hypnotic trance and you hit balls, you're not trying to do anything. Your shot shape that comes out predominantly is your natural shape. So if I don't think of anything, I'm a natural drawer of the ball. However, I've asked a lot of players in the past, try and hit a big draw, small draw, neutral, fade, big fade. Sometimes I just give them 3 of those. Try and hit a fade, draw, neutral. And in so many cases, the intention to hit the opposite to their natural shape comes out as the tightest dispersion. I never collected data on it, but I saw it a lot. I didn't care, right? Because I was doing N1 tests. I would just run the test and say, well, look, according to this data, you're a natural drawer, but when you try to fade it, you hit tighter dispersion. So maybe that should be your intention on the golf course. I fell into this category. So, and when someone tries to draw it, when they're a natural drawer, sometimes the dispersion gets wider. So you need to test these things, people out there. And then I call Lou on this because I spoke to him on Twitter recently because I knew he had actual data on it. He ran the data. He got a bunch of players, I think something like 200 players with launch monitors, and he asked them to hit draws versus fades. He asked them what their natural shape was, and then he looked at the dispersions. He found that 35% of people performed better with their non-dominant shape, which is a huge
Doing
amount.
the opposite in this game sometimes is an unlock.
Yeah, because it
We've talked a
gets you
lot about
closer to
that in the
neutral,
past.
right?
Yeah,
Usually, in most cases.
that's how I ended up here.
Yeah,
Just trying to hit fades, but path was still into out.
yeah. And it's interesting, when I try to hit a fade, I just get a neutral shot. I get a mix of spin axis. So when I try to hit a little baby fade, I get my most neutral shots. In order to actually fade it, I have to think big fade. In order to
Yeah,
draw, I
same.
think nothing. Yeah, it'd probably be the
Yeah,
same for
and
you.
so yeah, I think to kind of wrap all this up is like give the stuff a shot, see what happens. Like you can kind of again figure this out on your own, and you see what gives you the right answer. Sometimes, and again, sometimes these things would never occur to you. Like I played golf for 20 years, not thinking about this stuff. I was not doing anything that out of the box. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully, just that's what we're trying to do here is give you some ideas.
Yeah. So to wrap this up on the 90-minute mark, I'd say my position on this is like one is not better than the other. Draw, fade, big shapes, or more neutral, a more mix of spin axes, they're not better. You have to test it on an individual level. That may even change over time what's best for you. The first time you try and hit a neutral shot or a fade, you might be awful at it if you've never done it, but it may be the best one for you long term. I like to think of it in terms of I like to get these people to practice these things on the range, especially if they have a lot of time, because the worst case scenario really is you start to develop skill. You start to develop more awareness and a better
Hmm.
understanding of yourself. But yeah, what I'm looking for in testing is the tightest dispersion, generally, the lowest standard deviation. And then we're trying to overlay that correctly onto the target. So if your tightest dispersion happens to be a little bit left biased, then going out and using that and just aiming slightly to the right might be your best mathematical option. Again, all these things are on an individual level, but yeah, if you want to go deeper into this, the accuracy plan on adamyounggolf.com, I've got ways of testing these things and working them out. Even if you don't have a launch monitor to look at standard deviations, I've got a way that you can do that. The caveats to all of this, I suppose, and this would be another episode, would be, your confidence with a given shape. Even if on a range, you may find, oh, trying to fade it produces a tighter pattern. Well, what's your confidence level of taking that on the golf course? So really, range testing is one thing, but then course testing will give you a better idea. Uneven distributions might be a caveat to this. There are caveats to the caveat, but say for example, you hit a lot. Say for example, when trying to fade it, you hit a lot of straight shots, no right misses at all, or very few right misses, but lots of left misses. Or there's the outliers. Maybe there's enough outliers in there to nudge the pattern, so it's like a curved tadpole distribution. You've got a lot of straight shots and more of a left bias, and then when you flip shapes, you get the opposite, a mirror image of that. Now, I would say less than 1% of people I've tested fall into that category. It is an argument people use a lot. It's a good argument, I think, but it's very few people fall into that category. But maybe we'll talk about that. The other caveat, spin after hitting the green, as I talked about with winds, and we'll get ping guys on to go through that in more detail. I can't say definitively that I've got the answer for wind there. Also, something I've noticed is change in the oval tilt. So when you look at a bird's eye view of the shot distribution, what you notice is long left, short right. Okay, everybody has this, every right-hander has this pattern, long left, short right. There's a tilt to the oval of the distribution. Now, the reason for that is when we hit left, usually we do so with a more closed face. More closed faces usually have less spin loft, so they go farther. Long left, the pull hook goes a mile. Every time someone does it on the course, I play with my buddies, they hit it pull hook and they go, oh, that went 30 yards farther. I should have hit less club. I'm like, no, you just pull hooked it. There's a difference between hitting a straight shot 30 yards longer. And then short right, you have the opposite. Short right shots are hit with open faces, generally, more open faces, and thus that has more spin loft. The ball goes shorter, so you see this tilt to your distribution. However, that tilt gets more tilted when players hit fades and gets more level when players hit more draw shapes. not completely, but it is an effect there. And it is worth, again, exploring for better players who have the ability to hit these different shapes. It may be worth exploring that for certain scenarios. Say, for example, there's a pin tucked short close to a green. You may be better hitting more of a draw shot in there. By the way, that's a myth that draws don't stop as quickly. I'll go through that in a different episode. And when there's a tight green, imagine you've got a tighter shot, it may be worthwhile hitting more of a fade. You'll get more distance dispersion, but the accuracy improves a little bit. Now, with that said, it's a smaller effect than most people would guess. Everybody says you can't talk to a draw, and a fade listens. I think it's a little overblown, that. But again,
Yeah.
for 1% of people, maybe this may be worth something exploring.
Yeah,
John,
I agree.
yeah,
I,
on that.
I don't have too much to add there. Actually, I just think we're all chasing a tighter dispersion out there, and that's your North Star in all this conversations. Hopefully, we knocked a few things loose in your brain in this discussion, and perhaps challenge some myths that you might have held about shot shaping. Certainly, I think we've talked about this before in other episodes, but it's important. The ball moves through the direction and curvature of the golf ball is pretty important for our scoring ability and enjoyment too. So yeah, you want to wrap it up there?
Yep. Test, use it. Test, use a winner. That's the wrap up.
All right. Where can everyone find more resources on this, Adam? Your accuracy plan?
Yeah, the accuracy plan on adamyounggolf.com would link most of this. We look at tightening your dispersion, how to overlay it more effectively, and how to test and pick winners as well. So there's just a little bit of information in there. John, where can people find you and your info?
Check out the 4 Foundations of Golf. Thanks for everyone making it this far, as always, and we'll see you next time with a new episode.